Now, my next guest we all know for being a fabulous music journalist through the years, but he's also a fabulous photographer as well. And he's got his very own exhibition, which is taking place as part of this year's Ards International Guitar Festival. The man we're talking about is Stuart Bailie, and he joins me now in the studio. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks, Robin. Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. So the first thing we noticed is that fabulous camera sitting on the table there. So I believe you're a bit of a camera anorak, is that what you call them?
Well, yes, I do love old film cameras, and this is a Rolleiflex, which was beautiful German, 1959 vintage.
Wow.
And, you know, everything about it was kind of hand designed and hand engineered. And digital, I use digital cameras quite a lot, and they're very good. They're incredibly sharp and versatile. But there's something about a beautiful old school camera. There's a kind of that Hollywood look almost. Yeah. You know, if you do it right, it's all the shades of grey and the way the light reflects off the lens. So I've been using this quite a lot, and I've got I'm a little bit Imelda Marcos when it comes to old cameras. I've more than I'd like to admit, probably, but...
How many have you got?
More than 10, let's say.
Right, okay, yeah.
And during lockdown, you know, when you were bored, you ended up buying stuff just to keep yourself amused. But that's my favourite.
Oh, brilliant. And do you have your own darkroom and stuff? I
have a darkroom in the house, and I've collected lots of old gear over the years, so... on a happy night, you'll see me splashing around with chemicals.
Oh wow, okay. So lots of the photographs that have been taken on that camera are going into an exhibition. Yeah. How did all this come about then?
Well, like a lot of things, the conversation was pre-lockdown. It was a couple of years ago, and Anthony Toner, great singer-songwriter, guitarist, he was programming the festival that year in Ards, the Guitar Festival, and he says, and you know, you've taken pictures over the years, Stu, do you fancy doing an exhibition? And it kind of surprised me, and then I thought, yeah, okay. Yeah. And of course, then it was postponed for 2 years. So recently, then Emily from the festival rang up and says, you know, can we return to that? And I was going, great, because in the last 2 years, I launched a magazine called Dig With It, and taken lots and lots of more pictures. So it's actually going to be a stronger, more expansive exhibition, and the theme is guitar players. Yeah. So Northern Ireland has had its share. So it's a chance to go through my archives of old negatives and digital shots, and that's when you realise you're old, you know, and you go, oh, there's Gary Moore, there's Jackie Flavelle, there's Henry McCullough, you know, and you know, and it's bittersweet. You dig them up and you remember them when they were at their best and when you had lovely encounters with them. So it's going to be nice to see them up on the wall.
So we have the photo of Gary Moore on the screen now, who of course has got to be our greatest guitarist to come out of Northern Ireland. Isn't it about time we had a statue of Gary somewhere in Belfast?
I'm aware that there have been conversations, and there were a lot of conversations about murals and putting them up in East Belfast, and he was raised in Bread Street, around the side of the Conswater Shopping Centre. So at one stage I was part of a conversation to put a big Gary mural up, and I don't know what happened. But absolutely a statue. I think it's well deserved. He was an amazing guitar player, and hugely versatile. You know, mostly blues, but he could play loads of stuff. And in 2006, I worked on a TV documentary called So Hard to Beat. It was a story of Northern Ireland music, and we travelled mostly around the UK and America, meeting guitar players and singers and people who were part of our story. And Gary Moore, we met in a pub just outside Brighton, and we spent a day with him. Wow. And he told all the best stories, and he was very civil. Obviously, you know, you have to ask him the Thin Lizzy stories, and he obliges you with the great stories, and you know, Parisian Walkway and all of those things. So that was an honour. That was a lovely thing to do.
We've got a photograph appearing now of Grainne Duffy on screen as well.
You know, the story of Northern Ireland music, that you have Ruby Murray and you have Dana and you have a few other, Clodagh Rogers, but it's a bloke story, you know, and happily that's changing. Yeah. You know, so there's so many indie rock bands that are female, you know, bands like Problem Patterns and Strangely Places, and if you're going to have an international guitar festival, you have to have Grainne Duffy, because she is so bad,
Yes,
bad
yeah.
meaning good, and great attitude, lovely human being. So I've got borrowed a little bit of studio space in East Belfast, and she came up in the Sunday morning, and I think she said, how shall I dress? And I said, the dress code is rock and roll. And she says, oh, I can do that. Okay. And she brought her Les Paul guitar, and we took some pictures, and it came out quite well.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. You mentioned the magazine there as well, Dig With It.
Yeah.
Most people think it was a crazy thing to do, set up a magazine.
Yes.
And these days, when everything's moved on online, magazines aren't selling, but yours is doing all right, isn't it?
We're doing okay. We're on to issue 8 now. It's quarterly, so we're in our second year. And I'm 37 years as a music journalist. I arrived in London just ahead of Live Aid,
right,
1985. And I have printer's ink in my veins. I'm never happier when I'm rolling up my sleeves and reading a story, or writing a story, or working on the layout for a magazine page with a great designer. So it was always something to do. And I get very frustrated now, because online culture is so fast, but it's also very thin. And the tradition of spending a lot of time with an artist and writing about them to the best of your ability is almost a trade that's no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So part of the idea was, me and my daughter Betsy put the magazine together, and it was like, let's have great writing, great pictures, lovely paper that, you know, it smells gorgeous, and so we do it, and it's never going to make us rich. And also, it's a lovely, which you'll know all about, it's a lovely license to meet people that you want to meet.
Exactly. Yes,
and you're going, well, I really want to spend a little bit of time with Neil Shawcross, the painter, or Frank Ormsby, the poet, or you know, people who played in bands in, you know, the early ages of Northern Ireland music. And then you want to meet, you know, Joel Harkin, or Soak, or, you know, all of the new people that are coming up. So it gives me great pleasure to do it. And again, you edit a magazine, you can use your own photos, and nobody's going to tell you they're no good.
Exactly.
You know? So you know, it's like my ball, and I'm going to play whatever game I want with it. So I serve music and every way that I can, and it changes every 5-10 years.
Yeah.
But you know, until I croak it, I'll be following music and appreciate music, and
you still listen to new stuff every day.
Yes, very much so. You know, and again, the magazine is just shot in the arm for that. So you know, you know, today I'm going to be listening to the new tracks from Arborist, and they've just come in. Waiting to hear new stuff from Joshua Burnside. Loving the new Problem Pattern stuff. So yeah, every now and again you'll maybe miss something because you come from a previous background or whatever. But I love my punk rock, and Northern Ireland has an amazing tradition of unruly music.
Yes, yeah.
And in all its shapes and forms, I still love that.
Yeah, and we got that big gig coming up in August in Custom House Square with all the punk rock legends on the bill.
Well, yes. So that you're talking about the Stiff Little Fingers gig.
Yeah.
So again, that's been delayed. That will be wonderful. Ricky Warwick's on the bill. Terry Hooley's DJing at it. I think there's a few other bands on the bill as well. Maybe the Undertones are playing.
I think the Undertones are on it as well. Yeah. I mean, that's some lineup.
It is, and then myself and Terry are DJing at the OES Centre afterwards.
Brilliant.
So the gathering of the tribes, angry old men, and their wives who are possibly just as tough. But yeah, you know, we're very fortunate, Rob. We live in a great musical city, and I'm never bored, and I'm always energized, and you know, even in the toughest times, it puts a smile on your face.
You've had two very successful books out as well. I've enjoyed reading both of them, the Trouble Songs and the Van Morrison one as well. I mean, that must have been two fun projects to work on.
Trouble Songs is a very strange book in that at the time it was written in a little bit of haste, because we were coming up to the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and British Council wanted it to be launched at their conference.
Yeah.
And when it came out, it was like, oh, well, we could have done that better. It's a wee bit, you know. But weirdly, people around the world really love it. You know, it's suddenly gone big in Holland. I've no idea why.
Yeah.
You know, obviously one person or two people are going, everybody should read this.
Yes.
And the orders are coming in, and Christmas was busy. And the film rights have been sold to an American producer, which was great for me, for my finances. If and when it gets made, we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
But that's you know, bless that book. It's been so good to me, and the Van book sold well, and again it'll sell gradually, you know, as time goes on. So I'm kind of scratching my head, going, what's the next one? What do you do?
Yes,
I would love to put out my greatest hits, all my old articles.
Yeah.
30 years ago, I was on tour with U2 at the start of the Zoo TV tour. You know, hanging out with John Lee Hooker at his house in San Francisco, and lots of Radiohead stories and Manic stories. And I almost feel it's not quite, you know, I think I have to do something before that.
Yes.
And then that'll be my last lap at the park, you know.
Who was your first big interview that you sat down and you went, wow, this is why I'm doing this. This is great.
My first interview was a goth band called Flesh for Lulu, and they were very kind to me, and they'll always be very dear to my heart. I think Billy Bragg was probably one of the first people that I interviewed that had a bit of profile.
Yeah.
And he was just a gent, you know. There are people who are very kind to you, and then there are people like Morrissey who aren't very kind to you, you know. So I've met 90% of the people I've met have been very pleasant.
Yeah.
And you come away with lovely stories, you know. So at some stage, even if it's a vanity project that nobody buys, I would like to collect all my best stuff, and even just for my children to read and go, there you go, your dad fought in the rock and roll wars of the 80s and 90s, you know.
Well, I've got a photograph appearing on the screen now of a man who we both knew very well, who was always a pleasure to meet, always a pleasure to interview, because it's so many great stories. That is the late, great Henry McCullough.
Henry, you know, we probably took him for granted when he was with us, and he was always very obliging. We always had bits of chat with him. And again, this was the TV documentary I was doing, So Hard to Beat. And we were invited up to his place in his Ballywindland Road in Ballymoney. He called it Ballywonderland.
Yes, yeah.
And it wasn't really a cottage, but it sort of looked like a cottage. And then Josie kept chickens out the back, and he had a rock and roll life, and you know, the Joe Cocker years and the Paul McCartney years, and we sat for about 3 hours, and he told us all his best stories. And then we all calmed down, and he had a pot-bellied stove around the back of the house, and we all sat out, and the stove was crackling, and he was playing the current Paul McCartney album just after Linda had passed away, and we all just sat in the quiet and reflected on life.
Wow.
And I didn't take a lot of pictures while I was at that era. I was a wee bit shy, but every now and again you go and you'd take a snap. And with great fortune, I got a picture of Henry, and you can just see a man who has seen everything, good and bad.
That's what I love about this photograph. It's the way that I'll always remember Henry in that photograph, because you can see his face just says rock and roll, doesn't it?
He has looked into the abyss, and he has looked out of it again, and somehow, by good fortune and you know, trying my best at the time, I got a picture that stands the test of time, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, they can see that photograph on your exhibition, which runs in Newton Ards from the 7th until 28th of April, I think?
Yeah. So three good weeks, and it's in the town square in the Civic Hall, and you go in the door and you take a right, and there's 2 rooms. So I think the first room will be my black and white classics. and people like Niels Lofgren from Springsteen's band standing on Ormeau Avenue waving at me and things like that. And then the next room will be the Grainne Duffys and some of the contemporary stuff, Ricky Warwick in colour and things like that. So hopefully a good show.
Excellent. Well, Stuart, good to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for coming in, and the best of luck with the exhibition.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Stuart.